Alan Pierce rubbed his tired eyes as he stared at the screen of his monitoring station. Another quiet night shift at the Lunar Research Station was drawing to a close when something unusual caught his attention. The energy readings from Sector 7 were unlike anything he had seen before. "Diana, could you take a look at this?" he called out to his colleague, Dr. Diana Wright, who was analyzing data at the nearby workstation. Diana walked over, her footsteps echoing in the quiet laboratory. She leaned over Alan's shoulder, her brown eyes narrowing as she studied the readings. "That's strange," she muttered, reaching past him to adjust the display. "These energy patterns, they're too organized to be natural." The screen showed waves of light and energy moving in perfect geometric patterns, like a dance of mathematics through space. As they watched, the patterns grew stronger and more complex. "Should we alert command?" Alan asked, already knowing the answer but seeking confirmation. Diana nodded slowly, her face illuminated by the blue glow of the monitor. "Yes, but let's gather more data first. We don't want to sound a false alarm." They spent the next hour recording and analyzing the phenomenon. The patterns weren't random. They were repeating in sequences, like a message being broadcast again and again. Alan's heart raced as he realized what this might mean. The station's communication system crackled to life. "Lunar Research Station, this is Earth Control. We're picking up unusual readings in your sector. Please confirm." Alan pressed the response button. "Earth Control, this is Dr. Pierce. We've been tracking the anomaly for the past hour. The energy signatures suggest intelligent design. We're looking at possible first contact." There was a long pause before Earth Control responded. "Stand by for emergency protocols. All non-essential personnel are to evacuate to the lower levels." The station's lights shifted to amber, and a soft alarm began to sound. Diana quickly downloaded their data to a secure drive as other scientists hurried past their lab, heading for the designated safe areas. "Look," Diana pointed at the main viewport. Outside, in the stark blackness of space, something was changing. The stars seemed to bend and shift, and then they saw it, a massive structure appearing as if from nowhere, its surface catching the sunlight and breaking it into countless rainbow fragments. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. The structure was clearly artificial, but unlike anything humans had built. Its surface was faceted like a diamond, but it moved and shifted like something alive. "It's not just a ship," Alan whispered, his scientific mind racing to understand what he was seeing. I think it's alive." The crystalline structure continued to grow, forming intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with inner light. As they watched, smaller crystal formations began to break away from the main structure, moving with purpose toward the Lunar Research Station. Station Director Harris's voice came over the intercom. "All personnel, remain calm. We are initiating first contact protocols. Dr. Pierce and Dr. Wright, report to the main conference room immediately." As they hurried through the station's corridors, Alan's mind was already forming theories. "The energy readings make sense now," he said to Diana as they walked. "They're not using technology as we understand it. Their entire bodies must be living crystals capable of storing and transmitting energy." The conference room was already filled with senior staff when they arrived. The large screen on the wall showed multiple views of the crystal entities, now hovering just a few kilometers from the station. "What do we know?" Director Harris asked, his voice steady despite the unprecedented situation. Diana stepped forward, pulling up their data on the main screen. The entities appear to be silicon-based life forms, crystalline in structure. They're attempting communication through light patterns and energy pulses. We've identified recurring sequences that suggest a mathematical basis for their language. As if responding to her words, the crystal beings outside began emitting pulses of colored light in complex patterns. The station's computers worked to analyze the sequences, looking for any recognizable pattern or meaning. "There," Alan pointed to a recurring sequence. "They're using prime numbers as a base, It's the universal language of mathematics. The next few hours were a blur of activity as they worked to establish basic communication. The crystal beings, who they later learned called themselves the Luminar, were patient and methodical in their attempts to connect. By the time Earth's emergency response team arrived, Alan and Diana had made a breakthrough. Using a combination of mathematical sequences and light patterns, they had established a primitive form of communication. They're refugees, Alan explained to the assembled officials. Their home system is dying, and they've been searching for a compatible world. They found us through their long-range sensors and were drawn to our planet's unique combination of elements and energy fields. The Luminar continued their patient attempts at communication, their crystalline forms creating beautiful displays of light and color against the backdrop of space. Each pattern they made seemed more complex than the last, but also more purposeful. "Look at how they're adapting their patterns," Diana observed, pointing to the new formations. "They're learning from us, modifying their communication style to match our response patterns." As the Earth officials debated their next steps, Alan couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder. Here they were, making first contact with a species so different from humanity that they might as well have come from different universes. Yet somehow, through science and patience, they were finding ways to understand each other. The day shift was arriving by the time they had established reliable basic communication. The Luminar had managed to convey not just their refugee status, but also their peaceful intentions and their hope for cooperation with humanity. As Alan finally prepared to end his shift, he took one last look through the viewport at the crystalline beings. They had arranged themselves in a formation that resembled a double helix, the structure of human DNA. It was their way of showing they understood what humanity was, and that they were ready to learn more. "You know," he said to Diana as they walked toward their quarters, "this is just the beginning. Everything we know about life, about intelligence, about what's possible, it's all going to change." Diana smiled, her exhaustion evident, but her eyes bright with excitement. "That's why we became scientists, isn't it? To discover the impossible." As they reached their quarters, the station's lights dimmed to simulate night, but the glow from the Luminar outside created patterns of light and shadow that danced across the walls. It was a reminder that nothing would ever be quite the same again. Humanity had made first contact, and their new neighbors were nothing like anything they had imagined. The age of crystal and carbon was about to begin. 2 weeks after first contact, the moon's surface had changed forever. Where there was once only gray dust and rocky craters, now stood towering spires of crystal that caught sunlight and scattered it in rainbow patterns across the lunar landscape. The Luminar had built their temporary base, and it was unlike anything humans had ever seen. Kate Morrison stood at the observation window of the newly constructed Cultural Exchange Center, watching the crystal structures grow and change. As the lead communication specialist for the project, she had spent countless hours working to understand the Luminar's complex language of light and geometric patterns. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice behind her said. She turned to see Alan Pierce, who had dark circles under his eyes from long hours in the lab. "It's amazing," Kate replied, gesturing to the crystalline city. "They created all this in just 2 weeks. Makes our buildings look primitive in comparison." The Luminar didn't construct things the way humans did. Instead, they sang to the crystals using pulses of energy, encouraging them to grow in specific patterns. It was like watching a garden grow at high speed, except the plants were made of living crystal. A flash of light from outside caught their attention. One of the Luminar representatives, whom they called Crystal Harmony, was approaching the center. The beam's crystalline form shifted colors as it moved, creating patterns that Kate had learned to interpret as greeting signals. "They want to show us something," Kate said, reading the light patterns. "Something about their home system." In the main conference room, Crystal Harmony connected with the human computers in a way that still amazed the scientists. The crystalline being's structure began to glow, and suddenly the room was filled with a 3-dimensional projection of a distant star system. "This was our home," Crystal harmony communicated through patterns of light that Kate's translation matrix converted to words. The star grew unstable. Many were lost before we learned to travel between systems. The projection showed a beautiful world of crystal structures orbiting a dying red giant star. They watched as the star's radiation increased, causing the crystal structures to crack and shatter. It was a tragic story, told without words but full of emotion conveyed through light and color. "How many of your people survived?" Ellen asked, his voice soft with sympathy. The answer came in pulses of deep blue light, their color for sorrow. "Less than 1/10 of our population. We search now for a new home, a place where we can rebuild." While this conversation was happening, another group of Luminar was working with human scientists to share their technology. The crystalline beings had ways of storing and processing information that made Earth's most advanced computers look like children's toys. In her private quarters that evening, Kate reviewed the day's communications. The Luminar had been incredibly open with their knowledge, sharing everything from their history to their technology. But something was bothering her, subtle patterns in their communications that suggested they weren't telling the whole story. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. It was Diana Wright, carrying a tablet filled with new data. "Kate, you need to see this," Diana said, her face excited. "We've been analyzing the Luminar's crystal structure. It's not just their bodies. They can store memories, entire libraries of information, in their physical form." Kate leaned forward, interested, like living computers. "More than that," Diana explained, showing her the scans. "Each Luminar is like a piece of a larger network. When they come together, they can share and process information in ways we're just beginning to understand." But not everyone was excited about the Luminar's presence. Reports from Earth showed growing concern among some groups. The evening news was full of debates about the potential threats posed by such an advanced species. The next morning, Kate arrived at the Cultural Exchange Center to find an emergency meeting in progress. Representatives from Earth's governments were arguing about the Luminar's request for asylum. "We can't just let them settle here," one official argued. "Their technology is too advanced. How do we know they won't take over?" Crystal Harmony, present for the debate, emitted patterns of light that Kate quickly translated. "We seek only peace and cooperation. Our survival depends on finding harmony with others. We are not conquerors." To demonstrate their goodwill, the Luminar offered to share some of their crystal-based technology with Earth. They helped design new solar power systems that were far more efficient than anything humans had created. They showed how their living crystals could purify water and clean the air of pollutants. But the most impressive demonstration came when they revealed their medical technology. A human scientist had cut his hand in an accident, and a Luminar healer used crystal energy to seal the wound without leaving a scar. "The potential benefits are enormous," Alan said during a briefing with Earth officials. "Think about what this could mean for medicine, for energy production, for solving our environmental problems." Kate noticed that Crystal Harmony's colors shifted to patterns of worry during these discussions. That evening, she asked the Luminar representative about it. "There is concern," Crystal Harmony communicated. "Not all species welcome us. Some fear what we can do. We have learned caution." As if to prove this point, news arrived the next day of protests on Earth. Some people feared the Luminar would change human society too quickly. Others worried about becoming dependent on alien technology. Kate spent that night on the observation deck, watching Earth rise over the lunar horizon. The planet looked peaceful from up here, but she knew that tensions were growing. The Luminar's crystal city glowed with soft light beside her, a reminder of how much had changed in just 2 weeks. "We're at a turning point," she said to Alan when he joined her. "Everything's changing so fast. Are we ready for this?" Alan watched as a group of Luminar created a new crystal structure, their bodies glowing with coordinated patterns of light. "Ready or not, change is here. We just have to make sure we handle it right." As they talked, neither of them noticed the small ship leaving Earth's atmosphere, heading toward the moon. Inside were people who had decided that humanity wasn't ready for this change, and they were planning to do something about it. The day ended with a joint ceremony where the Luminar created a massive crystal structure in the shape of the United Nations logo, a gesture of peace and cooperation. But as the humans applauded, Kate noticed worried patterns flickering through the Luminar's bodies. They knew something was coming, something they hadn't told their human hosts about yet. In her quarters that night, Kate reviewed the day's light patterns again. Hidden in the normal communications, she found a repeating sequence she hadn't noticed before. When she ran it through her translation matrix, her blood ran cold. The Luminar weren't just refugees seeking a new home. They were running from something. And whatever it was following them. Gregory Hammond checked his weapon one last time as his small ship approached the moon. 5 other men and women sat quietly in the cabin with him, each convinced they were doing the right thing. Their mission was simple: destroy the Luminar's main crystal structure and force the aliens to leave. Remember, he told his team, we're protecting Earth. These crystals might look pretty, but they're a threat to everything we've built. Meanwhile, in the Cultural Exchange Center, Kate Morrison was trying to decode a troubling message. The patterns she discovered in the Luminar's communications pointed to something darker than she'd first thought. Alan, Diana, she called out to her colleagues. I need you to see this. The 3 humans gathered around her workstation as she played back the recorded light patterns. Diana's eyes widened as she understood what they were seeing. They're not just running from something, Diana said quietly. They're being hunted. Before they could discuss it further, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red warning lights flashed in every corridor. Unidentified vessel approaching, the station's computer announced. No authorization codes detected. Alan rushed to the main viewport just in time to see a small ship landing near one of the crystal structures. That's not a regular transport, he said, reaching for the communication panel. Security team to Sector 7. But it was too late. Explosions rocked the base of the Crystal City. Gregory Hammond and his team had planted their charges perfectly. Crystal fragments flew everywhere as the structure began to crack. The Luminar's response was immediate and unexpected. Instead of breaking apart, the damaged crystals began to glow with intense light. The pieces reformed and strengthened, adapting to the attack. Crystal harmony appeared beside Kate, its form pulsing with urgent patterns. We must protect the knowledge core, it communicated. If it's destroyed, centuries of our history will be lost. More explosions followed. Hammond's team was determined to finish their mission, but they hadn't counted on the Luminar's ability to repair and adapt. Ellen grabbed his emergency kit. We need to stop them before they damage the air seals. If they breach the dome, we'll all die, humans and Luminar alike. Diana had another concern: the station's nuclear power core. If their explosives hit that, they didn't need to finish the thought. Kate was already moving, her translation matrix ready. Crystal harmony, we need your help. Can your people contain the explosions? The Luminar's response was to gather around the threatened areas. Their crystalline bodies began to change, forming protective barriers that absorbed the shock waves from each new explosion. Gregory Hammond watched in frustration as his attacks failed to destroy the Crystal City. Switch to the high-powered charges, he ordered his team. But before they could act, something new appeared on their sensors. At first, it looked like a meteor shower, but the objects were moving too purposefully. Kate's translation matrix suddenly lit up with new patterns, patterns of pure terror from the Luminar. They're here, Crystal Harmony transmitted. The Void Hunters have found us. Dark ships emerged from the star-filled blackness, their surfaces seeming to swallow light rather than reflect it. They moved with deadly purpose toward the moon. In that moment, Gregory Hammond realized his terrible mistake. His team's attack had weakened the very defenses that might have protected Earth from what was coming. All humans, take shelter. Crystal Harmony broadcast, its patterns now sharp and urgent. The Void Hunters destroy all in their path. They see life itself as a mistake to be corrected. The dark ships launched their first attack, Not at the Luminar, but at Hammond's team. Their small ship exploded in a flash of dark energy. Only Hammond himself survived, protected at the last second by a crystalline shield that Crystal Harmony had created. Why? He asked the Luminar as they pulled him to safety. Why save me after what I did? Because all life is precious, Crystal Harmony answered through the translator. Even the life of those who fear us. The Void Hunters' ships surrounded the moon, their weapons charged. Through the translation matrix, Kate received their first and only message: surrender the crystal beings for harvesting, or your world will be cleansed. Ellen looked at the streaks of darkness moving across space toward them. How many ships do they have? Hundreds, Diana answered, checking the sensors. Maybe thousands. And these readings, their technology is beyond anything we've ever seen. Crystal Harmony's form pulsed with determination. We knew they would come. That is why we sought allies. Apart, we are vulnerable. Together, we might survive. Gregory Hammond stepped forward, his face showing the weight of his mistake. I wanted to protect Earth from you, he said to Crystal Harmony. But you're not the threat I should have feared. No, Kate agreed, watching the Void Hunters' ships move into attack formation. But now we have a choice to make. Do we stand together, or do we fall apart? The station's main screen lit up with a transmission from Earth Command. The world's leaders had seen the Void Hunters arrive. They wanted to know if the Luminar would help defend Earth, and if Earth should risk itself to protect the Luminar. As Crystal Harmony prepared to respond, more dark ships appeared. The Void Hunters were done waiting for an answer. The real battle for Earth's future was about to begin. Alan looked at his fellow humans, then at their crystalline allies. Whatever we decide, he said, we need to decide fast. Those ships aren't here to negotiate. The Luminar began to gather, their bodies linking together to form larger structures. Through the translation matrix, their message was clear. They would fight to protect their new friends, even if it meant their own destruction. Now humanity had to choose, stand with their new allies against a terrible threat, or give in to fear and surrender the Luminar to their hunters. As the dark ships moved closer, time for that choice was running out. Commander Patricia Ross stood at the command center of Earth's newly established lunar defense base, watching as more Void Hunter ships appeared in the darkness of space. She had been sent up from Earth just hours ago, with orders to coordinate humanity's response to this threat. Status report, she called out to her team. 30 Earth defense ships are in position, an officer replied. The Luminar are forming defensive structures around our key installations. Through the main window, she could see the crystalline beings at work. They moved with purpose, their bodies growing and changing to create shields and weapon platforms that glowed with inner light. Alan Pierce rushed into the command center, followed by Diana Wright. Commander, we've made a breakthrough, he said, trying to catch his breath. The Luminar showed us how to combine our technology with theirs. Diana spread out several diagrams on the command table. Human DNA, she explained, pointing to the patterns. It can be used to strengthen their crystal structures. Something about our genetic code helps stabilize their energy matrix. Commander Ross studied the diagrams. How fast can we implement this? We already have, Crystal Harmony said through Kate's translator as it entered the room. Its crystalline form had changed, now showing traces of organic patterns that looked almost like human DNA strands frozen in glass. The Void Hunters had given them 6 hours to surrender the Luminar. 5 of those hours were already gone, but they had used the time well. All around the moon, humans and Luminar worked together, preparing for the battle ahead. Gregory Hammond, the former attacker now turned ally, approached Commander Ross. I've mapped out their weak points, he said, displaying tactical data he had gathered during his failed attack. The crystal structures can absorb enormous amounts of energy, but they need time to process it. Then we give them that time. Commander Ross decided. She turned to Crystal Harmony. Can your people hold their shields long enough for our ships to attack? the crystalline being pulsed with determined light patterns. Together, we are stronger than alone. We will hold. Warning alarms blared throughout the base. The 6 hours were up. The Void Hunters began their advance. All ships, battle positions. Commander Ross ordered, "Remember your training. Remember what we're fighting for." The first wave of Void Hunter ships launched their attack. Dark energy beams struck the crystal shields around the moon. But instead of shattering, the crystals absorbed the energy, their structures reinforced by the human DNA patterns they now contained. "It's working," Diana shouted, watching the sensor readings. "The shields are holding." Alan studied the data flowing across his screen. "The Luminar are channeling the absorbed energy through the patterns we designed. They're not just blocking the attacks, they're getting stronger from them." Earth's ships moved into position, their weapons modified with crystal technology. When they fired, their beams were amplified and focused by crystalline lenses, turning them into powerful cutting tools that sliced through the Void Hunters' dark hulls. But the enemy was far from beaten. More ships appeared, launching new types of weapons. Some fired beams that tried to disrupt the DNA patterns in the crystal shields. Others released swarms of smaller craft that looked for gaps in the defenses. "They're adapting," Commander Ross observed grimly. "Crystal harmony. Can your people adapt faster?" The Luminar's response was to reshape their defensive structures, creating new patterns that seemed to flow like water while remaining hard as diamond. Kate's translation matrix struggled to keep up with the rapid changes in their communication patterns. "They're not just adapting," she realized, watching the light patterns. "They're evolving. Every attack teaches them something new." The battle raged for hours. The Void Hunters threw everything they had against the combined human Luminar defenses, but they couldn't break through. Every failed attack made their enemies stronger, as the crystal structures absorbed and learned from each new weapon. Gregory Hammond worked with Crystal Harmony, using his knowledge of tactical warfare to predict where the Void Hunters would strike next. His understanding of vulnerability helped the Luminar position their strongest defenses where they were needed most. "Look at the energy readings," Diana said to Alan as they monitored the battle. "The crystal structures are storing more power than should be possible. They're about to reach critical levels." Alan's eyes widened as he understood what this meant. They're not just defending. They're gathering energy for a counterattack. Commander Ross saw it too. "All Earth ships, pull back to safe distance," she ordered. "Let the Luminar do what they've been preparing for." The crystal structures around the moon began to pulse with blinding light. All the energy they had absorbed from the Void Hunters' attacks was about to be released at once. "Now," Crystal Harmony broadcasted, its pattern clear even without translation. Every crystal on the moon's surface lit up at once. The combined energy burst forth in a massive wave that rippled through space. When it hit the Void Hunters' ships, their dark hulls couldn't absorb or deflect it. Dozens of ships simply disappeared, their matter converted to energy and absorbed by the crystals. "First wave neutralized," an officer reported, "but more ships are coming." Commander Ross nodded grimly. "Then we keep fighting. The Earth won't fall today." The remaining Void Hunters pulled back, regrouping for another attack. But now they faced an enemy that grew stronger with every blow, an alliance of carbon and crystal that turned their own power against them. As they prepared for the next wave, Alan looked at the changed crystal structures around them. Human DNA patterns now flowed through all of them, creating designs that were neither fully human nor fully Luminar, but something new and powerful. "We've created something they've never seen before," he said to Diana. "Something they don't know how to fight." Crystal Harmony's form pulsed with what Kate's translator identified as pride and hope. "This is why we chose Earth," it transmitted. "Not just for sanctuary, but for partnership. Apart, we were vulnerable. Together, we are becoming something new." Commander Ross watched as her tactical display showed more Void Hunter ships approaching. The first wave had been defeated, but the real battle was just beginning. Yet as she looked at the seamless way humans and Luminar now worked together, She felt something she hadn't expected. Confidence. "All units, prepare for second wave," she ordered. "Show them what happens when they threaten our home." The Void Hunters had come expecting to find easy prey. Instead, they had found two species joined in common cause, their strengths combined in ways that created something entirely new. The next wave would face not just powerful weapons, but the unbreakable will of those fighting to protect their shared future. The second wave of Void Hunter ships filled the sky above the moon like a swarm of dark stars. Their new weapons were stronger, designed to counter the crystal human defenses that had worked so well in the first attack. Diana Wright stood at her monitoring station, watching as strange readings appeared on her screen. "They're trying something new," she called out. "The Void Hunters are targeting Earth's magnetic field." Commander Ross turned to Crystal Harmony. "What happens if they disrupt our magnetic field?" The crystalline being's colors darkened with concern. "Your planet's protection would fail. Radiation would destroy much of Earth's life." But Diana's eyes suddenly lit up with an idea. "Wait, the magnetic field. That's it." She turned to Alan. "Remember how the Luminar use energy fields to communicate? What if we could use Earth's magnetic field to boost their power?" Alan quickly understood. Like a giant amplifier, he rushed to his computer and began running calculations. Kate Morrison worked with Crystal Harmony to explain the plan to the other Luminar. The crystalline beings began to reorganize themselves, forming new patterns that aligned with Earth's magnetic field lines. Gregory Hammond, watching from his tactical station, saw what they were doing. "Commander," he called out, "if we position our ships along these same lines, we could create a synchronized attack pattern." Commander Ross nodded. "All ships, realigned by magnetic coordinates, follow the Luminar's lead." The Void Hunters struck first. Their dark energy weapons lashed out at Earth's magnetic field, trying to tear it apart. But instead of breaking, the field began to glow with strange light. "Now," Diana shouted. The Luminar activated their new formation. Energy coursed through Earth's magnetic field lines, turning them into glowing rivers of power. Each crystalline structure lit up like a beacon, connected to all the others through the planet's natural energy web. "Earth ships, attack pattern Delta," Commander Ross ordered. The human vessels moved in perfect sync with the Luminar formations, their crystal-enhanced weapons drawing power from the magnetic field. The Void Hunters hadn't expected this. Their attempts to destroy Earth's magnetic field only made it stronger, feeding more energy into the human Luminar network. But the enemy was far from beaten. A massive Void Hunter ship, bigger than all the others, moved into position above the moon. Its surface seemed to drink in all light, creating a sphere of absolute darkness. "Energy readings are off the charts," an officer reported. "They're gathering power for something big." Crystal Harmony's patterns showed urgent concern. "They will try to collapse all matter in this region into a singularity. We have seen them do this before." Ellen's mind raced. "If they create a black hole here, the Earth would be torn apart." Diana finished. Gregory Hammond stepped forward. "There might be a way." Everyone turned to look at him. "The Luminar can absorb and redirect energy. If we could get enough crystal mass close to their ship before they fire, it would be a suicide mission," Crystal Harmony transmitted. "I'll do it," Hammond said quietly. "I helped cause this by attacking you. Let me help end it." But Commander Ross shook her head. "We're not sacrificing anyone. There has to be another way." Diana's fingers flew across her keyboard. "The magnetic field. If we reverse the polarity and channel all power through the crystal network at once, it could work." Alan agreed, checking her calculations. "But we'd need every crystal structure, every ship, working in perfect sync." Kate's translation matrix lit up as Crystal Harmony communicated with all its people at once. Light patterns rippled through the crystal city as the Luminar agreed to the plan. "All ships, power to crystal arrays," Commander Ross ordered. "Prepare for field reversal on my mark." The massive Void Hunter ship began to pulse with dark energy. The space around it started to twist and bend as it prepared to create its singularity. 10 seconds to gravitational collapse, an officer called out. Commander Ross took a deep breath. All units, mark. Every human ship and every luminar crystal structure activated at once. Earth's magnetic field completely reversed direction in an instant. The energy release was tremendous, far beyond anything their sensors could measure. The Void Hunter's dark energy met this wall of power head-on. For a moment, it seemed like the two forces would tear space itself apart. Then something unexpected happened. The crystal structures began to sing, not with sound, but with pure energy. The vibrations traveled through the magnetic field lines, creating patterns of resonance that the Void Hunters couldn't counter. Their dark energy weapons tried to absorb the power, but there was too much. The massive ship's surface began to crack, lines of light appearing in its perfectly black hull. "Keep pushing," Commander Ross ordered. "Don't let up." The Luminar poured everything they had into the attack. The smaller crystal structures began to crack under the strain, but still they held on. Human DNA patterns within the crystals glowed brighter than ever, providing the stability needed to channel such enormous power. Gregory Hammond watched in awe as the Void Hunter's flagship began to break apart. "They never understood," he said quietly. "They hunt alone, but we learned to fight together." With a flash that temporarily blinded everyone, the massive ship exploded. The release of energy was channeled through the crystal network, preventing it from destroying the moon or Earth. When they could see again, the remaining Void Hunter ships were retreating. Their greatest weapon had failed, and they had no defense against this new kind of united power. "Did we win?" someone asked. Commander Ross studied her tactical displays. "We won this battle," she said carefully, "but they'll be back." Crystal Harmony's patterns showed both triumph and concern. "Yes, they will return, but now we know we can face them together." As the adrenaline of battle faded, they began to assess the damage. Many crystal structures were cracked or shattered. Several Earth ships had taken heavy damage, but they had survived, and they had proven something important. The combination of human adaptability and luminar power was stronger than either species alone. Diana looked at the readings from Earth's magnetic field. "The crystal network is permanently linked to it now," she said. "We've created something entirely new." Ellen nodded. "A planetary defense system that uses both our technologies, something the Void Hunters have never seen before." As repair work began, Commander Ross received a message from Earth Command. The world's leaders had watched the battle, and they had made their decision. The Luminar would be granted permanent residence rights on Earth and the Moon. The alliance was now official. Kate translated this news to Crystal Harmony, whose body glowed with patterns of joy and gratitude. "We will help prepare for their return," the Crystalline being transmitted. "Together, we will be ready." The dark ships of the Void Hunters disappeared into deep space, but everyone knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of a new chapter in human history, one where crystal and carbon stood together against the darkness. 1 year after the great battle with the Void Hunters, Earth had changed in ways no one could have imagined. Crystal spires now rose alongside human buildings in every major city. The moon glowed at night with the light of the restored luminar city, visible from Earth as a brilliant blue-white star. Alan Pierce stood in the new Earth Luminar Integration Center, watching a group of human children playing with young Luminar. The crystalline beings had learned to form shapes that delighted the children: butterflies, dragons, and other creatures made of living crystal. "Amazing how quickly they adapt to each other," Diana Wright said, joining him at the window. She had just finished another session studying the ongoing changes in both species. "Children don't carry our old fears," Alan replied. "To them, this is just normal now." Kate Morrison walked in, her translation matrix now a tiny crystal embedded in a bracelet. The technology had evolved rapidly since first contact. "You both need to see this," she said excitedly. "Something's happening in the medical ward." They hurried to the hospital wing where Crystal Harmony was working with human doctors. Over the past year, they had discovered that luminar healing abilities could be used to treat human illnesses. But today was different. A young human patient with a genetic disease lay on a bed, surrounded by softly glowing crystals. Crystal Harmony's form had changed, becoming almost transparent as it worked with the human DNA. "Watch," Kate whispered. The crystal structures began to pulse in rhythm with the patient's heartbeat. Slowly, the damaged genes in the child's body began to repair themselves. But this wasn't just healing. It was something new. The crystal patterns. Diana gasped, looking at her scanner. They're becoming part of his cellular structure. Gregory Hammond, now the head of Earth Luminar Security, entered the room. Since the battle, he had dedicated himself to protecting the alliance he once tried to destroy. "Is it safe?" he asked, concerned. Crystal Harmony's patterns showed excitement mixed with care. "The integration is natural." It transmitted through Kate's bracelet. His body accepts the crystal patterns as if they were always meant to be there. The child opened his eyes, which now had tiny flecks of crystal that caught the light. He smiled, feeling no pain for the first time in years. "I can see the light patterns now," he said in wonder. News of this development spread quickly. Some people were worried about these changes, but many more saw the potential. The ability to integrate crystal patterns with human DNA offered hope for curing diseases that had plagued humanity for centuries. Commander Ross, now Admiral Ross, arrived at the center for an emergency meeting. "The deep space sensors picked up something," she announced. "The Void Hunters are gathering their forces. They'll return, probably within a year." But instead of fear, the news was met with determination. In the years since the first battle, humans and Luminar had grown stronger together. The crystal cities weren't just beautiful. They were part of Earth's defense network, linked through the planet's magnetic field. "Show them what we've built," Admiral Ross requested. Crystal Harmony created a holographic display of Earth's new defenses. Crystal satellites orbited the planet, each one containing both human and Luminar technology. The moon base had grown into a vast complex of interwoven crystal and steel. "But our greatest strength isn't in our weapons," Alan said, gesturing to the medical ward. "It's in how we're evolving together." Diana nodded, pulling up her latest research data. "The crystal patterns in human DNA don't just heal, they adapt. Each generation will be stronger, able to understand both carbon and crystal life forms." Kate's bracelet suddenly lit up with urgent patterns. Crystal Harmony was detecting something new in the Integration Center's nursery. They all hurried to see what was happening. In the nursery, a human baby was reaching out to touch a young Luminar. As their forms met, something miraculous occurred. The child's touch caused crystal patterns to flow through their skin, while the young Luminar developed structures that looked almost organic. The first true hybrid, Crystal Harmony transmitted, its pattern showing joy and wonder, born of both worlds, yet belonging to neither, and to both. The baby laughed, its eyes showing the same crystalline flecks they had seen in the healed child. The young Luminar glowed with warm colors, responding to the baby's happiness. This was what the Void Hunters feared most, Alan realized. Not weapons or defenses, but evolution itself. The ability to change, to grow, to become something new and wonderful. "Life finds a way," Diana said softly, watching the child and the young Luminar play. "Not just to survive, but to thrive." In the year that followed, more changes came. Humans learned to read the Luminar's light patterns without translators. Luminar began to understand human emotions in deeper ways. The crystal cities grew more organic, while human buildings incorporated living crystal. Gregory Hammond stood with Crystal Harmony on the moon base, watching Earth rise over the horizon. The planet glowed with a new kind of light now, part crystal, part organic, all beautiful. "When I first saw your people," Hammond said, "I thought you would change our world too much. I never imagined the change would be so wonderful." Crystal Harmony's patterns showed understanding. Change is not loss, it transmitted. It is growth. When the Void Hunters return, they will find not two separate species, but one united force. In the Integration Center nursery, more hybrid children were born. Each one carried the strength of both species, the adaptability of carbon, the power of crystal. They were the future, a future that neither humans nor Luminar could have created alone. Ellen, Diana, and Kate stood together in the observation room, watching Earth's new defense fleet practice maneuvers around the moon. Crystal ships flew alongside human vessels, their movements perfectly coordinated. "We're ready for them now," Kate said, her crystal bracelet glowing softly. Diana smiled, looking at the latest DNA scans from the hybrid children. "We're more than ready. We're becoming something they can't understand or defeat." Ellen watched as another crystal spire grew in the distance, its pattern matching the dreams of the children who would inherit this new world. "This isn't just about survival anymore," he said. "It's about showing the universe what's possible when we grow together instead of fighting alone." The story of the crystal beings and the carbon warriors didn't end with a battle. It ended with a beginning, the birth of a new kind of life, a new way of being. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, the Void Hunters were about to learn that the power of evolution would always be stronger than the power of destruction.